Hello, I'm Eric Brown, and I recently had the opportunity to interview Erik Dalton and Gil Hedley to talk about their current projects, and in particular, Erik Dalton's upcoming Oklahoma City workshop happening June 30th, 2023. Now, I'm sure that you're familiar with Erik Dalton, who developed myoskeletal alignment techniques, often referred to as MAT, to treat chronic pain, postural distortions, and movement dysfunction. Matt evolved from Erik's extensive background in osteopathy, Rolfing, massage therapy, and his work with clients in private practice spanning more than 4 decades. Erik is currently at work preparing for his annual Oklahoma City Mat workshop titled Leveling the Head and Tail, Techniques for Tension, Trauma, and Weak Posture. Gil Hedley is an author and educator who teaches anatomy in the Dissection Laboratory. Gil is the producer of the Integral Anatomy series, the Anatomy from A to Z project, and more recently, the Nerve project. Gil is a guest presenter at Erik's upcoming Oklahoma City workshop. I'm super excited to hear more about what each of you are doing and find out more about your work and projects you have coming up. Now, I know both of you have known each other for a while, but I don't really know the relationship you have. So maybe I'll start with this question: is when did you first meet, and what were your initial impressions of each other? And maybe Erik, I'll have you start off with that one.
God, I just don't remember.
That's
I know
probably-
I just remember Tom Myers telling me, you got to meet this guy, Gil Hedley. He is one crazy, wild, brilliant character. And when Tom says that, I typically listen. And that's what got me onto you. But I do not remember the first time we met. It's been so long.
Probably an AMTA conference or something,
Yeah.
running booths. That sounds about right.
Okay, so my takeaway from this is you're both very forgettable.
Yeah, that's
Not
about
really.
right.
Fantastic.
No, not really. Gil's the kind of guy that once you meet him, you feel like you've known him for a long time. You know what? You want to cuddle, you want to grab him and squeeze him. That's just how he's always been. From my very first, encounters with Gil, I always just wanted to give him a hug. And I go,
I'll take it. And my recollection is that Erik has always been warm and supportive. So,
oh yeah,
from the get-go. So I've always felt like, golly, there are wings ahead of me here. I'll ride them.
Okay. Now, one point of connection for the two of you is Rolfing. Now, you both come from a Rolfing background, but your professional lives have taken very different paths. Now, how has that experience with Ida Rolf or training in Rolfing influenced what you do today? Gil, do you want to take that one?
Oh, I stand on the shoulders of that training. It was meeting Tom at the Rolf Institute that got me keyed up about anatomy. I had already been interested in it, but he was just such a fun person that I thought, oh, this is a different way to teach than my professors in grad school, who were basically combat trained intellectual warriors. And I liked much more Tom's approach of joyful interaction with the community of learners. So the Rolf Institute, at the very least, got me to meet Tom and Robert Schleip, who were both my teachers there, and inspired me to be a good teacher as opposed to a warrior in the classroom playing whack-a-mole with my students, which is kind of how grad work was in University of Chicago.
And we're talking about Tom Myers.
Yeah,
correct?
Tom Myers. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Erik? How has that influenced your work today?
Well, first of all, I never expected I was going to touch bodies for a living. That was not my plan. I was going to be a nutritionist, and I was working with the Health Institute of San Diego when I first got Rolfed, and the guy turned me on to it, said, man, you've got to do this. You seem to be real interested in it. And from day one, I hated it. I hated my initial training because I felt really inadequate, even though I had 500 hours of massage training under there. A lot of the people that were going through had a lot more experience and so it was a little intimidating my first couple of months there. But after that, like Gil said, it's just, it's the foundation of everything. Every lady particularly needs to really get into and study Ida Rolf, just like most of us need to get in and study Moshe Feldenkrais, two of the most interesting people who ever walked the earth. And so, it's still a foundation for everything I do.
Okay, now you both have, again, you both have taken very different paths, but I want to get your perspective on basically the current practice of massage or manual therapy. What are we getting wrong about our thinking or practice of massage or manual therapy? And what should we be thinking or doing instead? Erik?
Well, I think massage is coming along. I think the whole field is moving along pretty well. We're adopting a lot of the new research. The Massage Therapy Foundation and some of those people are keeping up with some of the research. Finally, I keep donating every year to that foundation, which is really well run, hoping that they keep up with some of Gil's work and some of the stuff that like he says, Schleip and the Steckos and those people are doing. But yeah, there's still a lot to learn, and I got hooked on the biopsychosocial model just because my background was psychology, and so it rang home to me, and I loved the neuroscience, and I started getting involved with some of the guys at Stanford, particularly Robert Sapolsky, who is my idol, and so that's the path I took. But I don't think we're really doing anything wrong. It's just a constant evolution. It's a roller coaster. It's a big circle. Oh, this is no good. And 6 months later, oh yeah, it turns out that was really important. And that's throughout science, throughout research. It's always been like that.
Have any thoughts on this question? So what are we getting wrong about our thinking or practice of massage or manual therapy? What should we be doing instead?
Well, I'd have to agree with Erik. I wouldn't frame a question in a right-wrong way, but there is a learning curve in any industry, and also waves, as Erik said, where you go in and out of things. I'd say that adding the middle of the body back into the story would be really helpful, and not just the musculoskeletal system, because you can't not touch the whole person. And if you think that, viscera are out of your scope of practice for some reason, you're not quite grasping the fact that the second you touch someone's skin or interact with them or compliment them and see their face flush, you've interacted with their viscera, and there's no getting away from it. So, dealing with the guts is, to my mind, it's not so much, whether everyone needs to be a visceral manipulator, but it's more like, will you at least know what's there and consciously recognize the involvement of the viscera in every musculoskeletal issue. There's no getting away from it, because the viscera go from the core to the periphery, so you can't escape them. So that would be one little notion. Another notion might be the tendency of the industry to fall in love with particular named muscle tissues as if they were entities unto themselves, and then sponsoring grand inquiries into them, whether it be it's seasonal, but the piriformis, the psoas, the quadratus lumborum, whoever is the enemy or hero of the day. And I would always just call people back to context. That's kind of my whole thing, is to contextualize everything. So whatever your favorite thing is, to invite greater context for that, to recognize that we can only touch the whole person, encounter the whole person, and you are always touching the whole person. So you might as well know what you're doing while you're doing it.
Yeah, you're changing their level of consciousness as soon as you touch them, both parties, the therapist and the person being treated. The consciousness changes, and you've got to understand that. That's why I like to talk about brainwaves in my seminar. Trying to identify when they're going from beta to alpha. Try to get them when they're in theta. Start queuing them up. We're going to work together. We're going to get this thing fixed. And next time you come in, all that stuff. When they're 7 to 8 times more suggestible, all those things are important. Whole body.
I love that, Eric, because that's something I am very conscious of when people walk into the laboratory with me, that they go into they change states of consciousness, and then I become that much more responsible for what comes out of my mouth or what I offer the people. Yeah, right. Whether it be on a table, or in a classroom, that there's a tremendous responsibility to serve, support, advance, grow, as opposed to rattle off on whatever's pissing me off that day or something like that.
Right.
Okay. Now, Erik and Gil, let's say you run into each other at an airport and both of your flights are delayed. You're going to grab a beer together. What are the two of you going to talk about?
Okay, I'd like to start that because there's a question I've been wanting to ask Gil. You guys, if you haven't been on his website, this guy, he's so underrates himself, I think. I mean, there's just so much wonderful information on that website. I go through it a lot, and first of all, I just want to tell one story. And Gil, I can't remember the details of this, but one thing in one of your books is you were taking confession. You're 28 years old, traveling through philosophy. First of all, he's got a PhD in philosophy at the University of Chicago or somewhere, and pretty cocky kid with his cousin or something, traveling through, doing all these monasteries and shit like that, and so he decides to take confession from this old priest, and he gets in there and he gets in a philosophical argument with this guy. And he finally tells him, "You can't be saved. We can't, God will not save you." And went out the gate, put his hands over his ear. Okay, that's that story. I just cracks me up every time I think of it. Okay, the question, I just want to ask this one question. Okay, so when the vagus nerve comes down through the hiatus, right? And I have a lot of people with GERD and reflux, all kinds of stuff like that, hiatal hernias. Isn't the vagus nerve kind of doesn't surround the esophagus? Doesn't it completely surround the esophagus as it goes through? And because I'm always doing a release I've been doing for decades and decades. And at first I thought I was actually pushing down the stomach to help relieve a sliding hernia. But in fact, I think that I was probably taking compression off the vagus nerve. Is that possible?
That is absolutely possible. It is not only possible, but likely. I've just spent 2 weeks on that spot. I can see every thread in my mind. The esophageal plexus is a marriage of the, parallel sides of the vagus as it wraps the esophagus. That plexus kind of diminishes at the esophageal hiatus. The two branches, really more than two branches because they split at that point, are coming through the esophageal hiatus. I have looked so carefully at this spot to see if I could note fibers of the vagus going into the crus of the diaphragm, into the hiatal pathway. I believe they do, although there's not a lot of testimony for that on PubMed or what have you, but I'm staring at it. But that doesn't mean I know what I'm staring at. So it's ultimately got to get it under a microscope. But at that point, immediately past the esophageal hiatus on a good day, the gastric plexus forms right at the esophageal portion of the stomach. So there's this quite a complex anterior vagus complex there. And that, in the case of the hernia, is being pulled up. Right? It's being pulled up. So that gastric plexus could end up on the far side of the hiatus. So what you describe is exactly accurate and exactly possible. And I always say, we tell all kinds of stories about our work. We don't necessarily know what's going on in there because we can't always see it. But if it helps, run with that. And so I always say, hold your good practices dearly and your theories about them very lightly. But in this case, your theory is perfectly correct.
I always wanted to know that. I've been wanting to ask you that for a long time. Anyway.
Why'd you wait so long?
Because you're just now doing nerves. You told me that you told me that you'd work for 2 days on like 2 inches of some part of that. I don't know whether it was cranial nerve or something, but
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than that. I mean, I can't tell you how slow this project is going.
I can't imagine you trying to take on a project of dissecting nerves. I can't imagine it.
It's like literally pulling molecules off of threads that are buried inside of nests of other threads that are, it's, I mean, I can totally see why nobody does this stuff. Because it's torture. It's literally physical and mental torture. And all day long, we just sit there with 50 books open and the internet, because every single one of them disagree on almost every point. Yeah, because there's so much variation, right? There's just tremendous variation. So you just can't document every thread of oak tree, right? The oak tree, look out in the woods. There's a lot of different oak trees. There's a lot of different nerve trees. So every human being is walking around with a different nerve tree, and you're trying to write down the nerve tree in a book. It's not going to be right.
Okay, so now I know exactly the kind of conversation you guys would have over a beer.
Yeah.
Where's the beer? Eric,
Unfortunately, we don't have our beers here with us. Or this interview could get much more interesting, I'm sure. So let me turn to you now, Gil, for a little bit, because we've been talking about this nerve project. So you've been working for the last 4 months on a deep dive into the human nervous system for this nerve project. And you're going to be presenting some of your findings at Erik's upcoming workshop in Oklahoma City this summer.
I can't stop thinking about it. I'm like, ooh, I can show this to Erik's peeps. Ooh, I can show this to Erik's peeps.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to it. But can you tell us a little bit about the nerve project and the inspiration behind it?
I'd say the inspiration was an image that I saw maybe 25 years ago of a dissection that was done at the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine in Kirksville, Missouri, the original osteopathic school. And in 1925, 2 medical students there were approached by a couple of professors who admired the good job they did on an arm in terms of the nerves. And they said, why don't you do that to the whole body? And so they were given a cadaver, and they spent these two students spent 1,500 hours doing what remains to be, since that point, the most detailed individual dissection of a nerve tree ever to be done. I've never seen anything even remotely comparable to it. And this thing got, preserved and lacquered onto a giant board, and it looks like a cloud. It looks like just a cloud. It's the original cloud network. It's the cloud of nerves of this human form. And it traveled around the country for several years and was greatly admired, as it should be today. So I saw that and I was like, I want to do that. And 25 years later, I realized I still can't do that, because I would need several years in a lab rather than several months to accomplish what they did. And also, what I realized wasn't done there. I mean, there's a great wow factor when you see this image, but there's no process and you can't connect it to anything. And I'm an integral anatomist, and I want to see the process and the relationships. I want to document the process and the relationships. So that's what I've been doing. And I just sort of set myself a block of time that I was able to get in the lab and to do as best as I could in that time frame, documenting from an integral perspective the relationship of that tree to the tissues in which it's embedded. And it's been a eye-opening experience.
Now I understand you're about 3 months into this 4-month project.
Yeah.
Now, is there something you've discovered during the project that's surprised or excited you? And if you have, or is there something that might change the way body workers approach their sessions?
We were having this discussion yesterday. I mean, there's so many things, and I couldn't even begin to go through all of them. But one of the things that's been really interesting is the way in which the greatest intricacies of the nerve tree, as I like to call it, those greatest intricacies are embedded in lymph all the time. all I do all day long for the past several months is pick away lymph tissues from nerve fibers. So the very physical process and laborious, tedious process that I've been engaged in order to reveal this nerve tree has amounted to picking away the lymphatics. And so that's interesting, right? That literally this structure of the network is embedded in lymph tissue. Now, what body workers will do with that, I don't know. I just show them stuff, and the brilliant people who come to take my classes and who serve humanity by touching them take it and run with it. What do you think about that, Erik? I don't know if that's a revelation to you, but I just had no clue how, like, here's why I missed it all these years, because I've been cutting out the yellow stuff to show the more famous stuff that people are interested in. It turns out the yellow stuff is where all the nerves were. So
that's totally interesting to me, because it's more of the lymphatic. When we talk about the lymphatics, are we talking about the actual liquid part, or we're talking about just the vessels, the little vessels that run alongside, right?
We're talking about
the waste.
Yeah, tiny nodes.
Because they're also collecting waste from the nerves themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the arteries. The nerves are literally wrapped around the arteries. So at all times, the arteries are running through sleeves of nerves embedded in lymphatics.
Right. Okay. So when there's entrapment, which we're going to probably talk about later when we talk about nerve mobilization. So what's entrapping? I mean, the limbs, that should give it some sort of a cushion, and unless it's dehydrated, does it get dehydrated like fascia could be dehydrated, or what?
I don't see why not. I mean, in other words, as a fluid pathway, there could be less or more of it, I suppose. And also, it is a dense net. I can imagine the net becoming more dense under untoward circumstances, or failure to use or to move, or under stasis and conditions of stasis, dehydration, and inflammation. So, or maybe even edematic conditions would be stressful on the nervous tissues as well. Why are lipedema people in pain all the time?
Yeah,
it's something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, now, Gil, you've talked about integral anatomy. For listeners, can you tell us what that is? And how is that different than regional anatomy that, massage therapists learn in school? And why is that, again, of interest to body workers or massage therapists?
Well, I would say regional anatomy is the anatomy that we borrowed from the medical establishment, whose philosophical starting points are very different than those of the bodywork, yoga, Pilates communities, physical trainers, and all who have maybe, hopefully, or I'm encouraging, a more integral approach, which is to say, an approach that respects and appreciates and looks for relationships and continuities rather than parts and pieces. So it's a famous experience of any body worker that you touch someone here and someone says, that's strange. My shoulder feels better. You're working on my knee. Like, how can that be? Or whatever cross regional experience that people have, because there are no regions. Those are mental constructs. They're chapters in books. They're quite absurd. And when you're actually doing dissection and following textures rather than notions, when you follow a texture, you find that texture wraps the whole body, and that you can pull on that cloth from just about anywhere and affect something at a distance. The vectors cross all regions. And so regional anatomy may be a way to facilitate memorization for a medical student or something like that, but it certainly has very little to do with how the body functions or how we experience the whole that is the human form. And so integral anatomy, let's say, is a homegrown anatomy. It's an anatomy that comes from out of our experience as body workers, that speaks to that experience and speaks to the experience of the people we work with and our own, witnessing as we walk through the world in our bodies, that they're one, and the regions are, kind of not of service, let's say, to our experience. I very much want my surgeon to know regional anatomy. I want that surgeon to be conscious of the particulars of an area and not cut out the wrong thing or what have you. That being said, they're famously not integrated in their approach. You literally got to go down a different hallway to find someone who can talk to your gallbladder, and a different hallway to someone who's knows something about your bladder. Whereas a body worker is ranging over the whole form and need an anatomy that's coherent with their knowledge and experience. That's what integral anatomy is.
Well said.
Okay. Now the title of your presentation at Erik's workshop is Exploring the Nervous System from an Integral Anatomy Perspective. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek or a teaser about the material you're going to be presenting? No?
Nothing.
Okay.
No,
I can just tell you it's going to be fantastic. I've seen Gil present. He's absolutely one of my favorite presenters of all time. Vancouver conference. I'll never forget your presentation at the fourth Fascial Congress in Vancouver. Unbelievable. Brought the house down. I actually filmed it illegally, and I think Gil got mad at me for that. It's on YouTube, by the way.
I was like, Erik.
I know he did. I got some of the best parts, but
I'm glad you did, actually.
You are. Thank you. I've been worrying about that for a long time.
Oh, no. I was. No one better could have done what you did. But I was literally curled up like in a fetal position in the front row next to Tom Myers saying, "Shoot me now," because I don't want to go up there.
You're kidding. Before that presentation.
Oh yeah, I was in a total mental collapse, and I had just seen these three or four wonderful presentations. I was like, I got nothing to add. I got nothing to say. My stuff is worthless. I went into this total ego collapse, and Tom was like, "Go!" And I'm like, I jumped out on stage, and I just love people, and I stood there and just had a blast. It was really fun.
Well, I have no doubt that you're going to have something to share at Erik's workshop, and from the sounds of it, we're just going to have to just show up if we're going to find out what you're going to be talking about.
Well, what I'll probably do is share with folks a whole bunch of images from what I've been creating. This is artwork, really. Ultimately, I'm an artist, a sculptor. And so I'll be sharing a lot of images from that, and hopefully stimulating thoughts and conversations about, well, if that's in there, then I must be touching it. Whether I'm touching it on purpose or by accident is another question. If I'm going to touch it on purpose, what kind of an intention would I bring to it? If I'm going to touch it by accident, what might that mean? How might I be a little more cautious when I recognize the friggin' bowl of linguine in my neck that I didn't know was there, or elsewhere? I've spent a month on peripheral, cutaneous nerves, and that's really interesting. And how does that work? And that's just one little compartment of it, because then we've got, what's how are we raising our consciousness in relationship to the fact that this is within us, and how do we use that as a tool to become more whole people? Because who gives a crap about the meat? It's not about meat. It's about raising our vibration as human beings and being better people. I mean, if it's just about like meat manipulation, I'm already bored. So.
Now, you're the board president for the Institute of Anatomical Research. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization? What's the mission?
Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, we're keen to involve our community in learning about anatomy, specifically by means of, cadaver exploration. So that's kind of our niche, is to explain the complexity of the human form as it presents in individual examples, which we're privileged to be on the receiving end of, having a donor program of our own, and also tapping into other donor programs when we don't, when we can't supply our own needs. So we have high school groups coming in. We have drop-in services. We have, local community organizations, paramedics. We're in a very military area. Folks are always trying to learn anatomy to serve folks. So we serve all those kind of communities, but we also, invite in folks to do workshops, in our space and bring people from all over the world. So
how can massage therapists get involved?
send money.
Okay.
Or come to the classes. So we have a website, which you might link to, not my website, but the Institute's website here in Colorado Springs, which, will have information both on our classes and also our donor program, because we're always keen to, receive donations.
We know you're going to be in Oklahoma City in June.
Yeah.
But other than the big event with Erik, what else is on your calendar? What's next for you? What are the projects or events that are coming up?
Well, I have 3 courses scheduled. I had sort of taken myself off of the dissection schedule last year. I just 26 straight years of traveling, and I needed to edit the Anatomy from A to Z project that I had filmed for 17 months. And so I edited 1,400 videos while my friends taught my classes for me. And this year I'm back on the schedule. So I'll be teaching a 6-day workshop in July, a 10-day workshop in August, and another 10-day workshop in September. So excited about that, because I really, between the A to Z project, which in total was a 3-year long full-time marathon, literally, and this nerve project, I've learned a lot. And so I'm kind of excited to, be back in the lab with a group of people and see what different things come out of my mouth, or what I'm excited to share with folks, based on that experience, as much as I am excited to be at Erik's conference, because that's really, I really appreciate the invitation, Erik, because it's provided kind of a focal point for me to bring my attention in the lab in a way that I know I can convert into service to your community.
We're all looking
Erik.
forward to it. We're all looking forward to it. We're going to have 250 people in there eager to see what your nerve project looks like. I'm definitely interested. I can hardly wait, because nerves, the central nervous system and the brain, all that brain-based stuff is of total interest to me.
Yeah.
So Erik, what's an interesting question I should have asked Gil but didn't?
God, I don't know. I mean, we could talk forever. I personally, if I were doing this podcast and with just Gil and I would be talking a lot about philosophy. I'm into a lot of the same things that Gil's into. Of course, he's got an enormous background in, my minor was philosophy of religion in college, but when I started looking at Gill stuff years ago, and when he tried to go look at his PhD thesis, which was completely ridiculous. No one will ever make it through that damn thing.
My mom read it.
Your mother read it front to back. I couldn't believe that. Yeah, God, she must be one bright gal. I got lost conceptually right away. But anyway, no, I don't know. I'm gonna have to give up on that question.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. No, I threw that at you. There's so much to talk about, and both of you have very interesting backgrounds coming from. I think it's theology. Were you in theology, Gil?
Me, theological ethics was my field of study in graduate school. Yeah. And
you, Erik, in psychology. So they're interesting backgrounds to bring to the body. For sure.
They're the best backgrounds to bring to the body. Otherwise, you're liable to mistake it for some fancy sweat machine or something. So
totally short. So Erik, I'm going to turn to you now. I'm going to ask you some questions and find out a little bit more about your work and what you're up to. Now, you're known as the originator of myoskeletal alignment techniques, or you often refer to it as MAT. Can you share a little bit about your work and why it's of interest to massage therapists or manual therapists, body workers?
First of all, let me just say that a little backstory. Back in the 70s, late 70s, when people got into body work, it wasn't because they were at a Votech school and said, do I want to be an auto mechanic? Or would I rather, massage therapy, that's, I can make more money being a massage. We got into it because somebody put their hands on us and changed our lives. And in my case, it was a Rolfer down. I was working at the Health Institute of San Diego and heard about a guy, Del Mar, that a Rolfer, and I'd had a chronic shoulder blade problem from sitting in recording studios in LA, beating on the snare drum with my left arm for years. Nobody in LA was able to help me, and this guy helped me. And so that changed my life. And he talked me into enrolling in massage college out there in San Diego, and in hopes of being accepted to the Rolf Institute. So the Rolf training, as Gil and I were talking about earlier, is such a great foundational work for any person that puts their hands on a body. But I fractured my neck in 1989 in a clumsy judo fall, and that changed my life in many, many ways, because I didn't know if I was going to make it through there with my left arm. I couldn't pick up a pencil off the table for 6 months. My left arm was unusable, and so I started getting interested in bones, muscles, and bones and joints and nerves, and so I was able to get accepted to study with legendary Dr. Philip Greenman at Michigan State College of Osteopathic Medicine. So I went for 9 years postgraduate workshops there. There are 20, I think there are like 20 workshops that they offer there. And I took all of them so many times. At one time I'm sitting in class and you have to stand up and introduce yourself in class and say why you're there and what you're interested in. I stood up and Greenman said, Erik, are you taking this class again? You should be teaching this class now. And this is your like 5th time to take it. It all was just going over my head, but that's what you love. For me, a lot of people in my class, I say, let that shit go over your head. That to me, that's just inspiration. That's just stuff I want to learn later. Right. And so, that when I started combining that, first of all, I figured I'm never going to learn this stuff if I don't start teaching it. So in 94, taught my first workshop here in Oklahoma City in a big 1,300 square foot pink garage. And we had 10 people show up, and I was absolutely thrilled, me and Kim Miller. And so from then on, it was just, my practice was booming. And I decided in 1998 to put it all together into what turned out to be a pretty successful home study course. I named it Myoskeletal Alignment Techniques, and licensed it through the Oklahoma Board of Private Vocational Schools in the name of Freedom from Pain Institute. So it's just a combination of all that stuff. First it was mainly just the tissue work that Gil's talking about, the muscles and how they relate to joints and nerves and things like that. And then, you keep going down the path, and I was able to start integrating my biopsychosocial stuff, started going to a lot of the conferences at the San Diego Pain Summit, which were really, really enlightening. And I got completely hooked on the neuroscience end of it. And so I started putting all that together. And basically, Matt is, as you know, Erik, it's just, I'm a perpetual learner, and it's constantly evolving. So as research changes, you've got 2 choices as an educator. You either stick with what you've got and hope that it comes around again, or you change with the times. And it's hard to change, man. It's hard to give up your dogma. And but I try to do that. I try to give it up, and through all of my work, it's more of an evolution. When people look at it, they see what I believed back then in 1998 and how things have changed. So bottom line, people, the massage therapists and body workers and everything have been drawn to this. And I've got some great teachers out there right now that are helping people in pain, because that's what we focus on. We focus on the many different ways to try to help people with their pain and injury complaints and their stress problems.
Yeah. So because it's evolved so much over time, it's difficult to describe Matt in 50 words or less. It's an evolving system basically based on research. And you often refer to Matt as brain-based bodywork. Can you just briefly outline what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of what we've been talking about. Okay. All right. So people used to come to me week after week with the same chronic, what they thought quadratus lumborum problem, pain down there. And I'd get my elbow in there. And sure enough, it's all guarded up and all wadded up, and I would beat the crap out of it. And a couple of weeks later, they'd come back in, same problem, same place. A couple of weeks later, they come back in, same place. So I finally got to thinking, you know what? If this keeps coming back there, there must be a reason. And the reason is the brain's putting it there. You're not getting to the source. If you don't get to the source of that problem, that the brain still perceives threat, and it's going to layer that area with protective muscle guarding no matter what you do. So when you keep working on somebody between their shoulder blades or their neck or their low back, and you keep feeling that spasm session after session, you're not doing them much good. So that's kind of the brain-based thing. I started thinking, the brains. Well, I didn't start thinking this. I'm copying it from all the people that I'm studying. But I started really getting more interested in what parts of the brain are doing this. How does the midbrain really, have what kind of effect is that really having on their posture? The holding them up, and does posture relate to pain and things like that? So. That's how I got hooked on it. And right now, that's my big hook, man. I'm like.
Now, the title of the upcoming workshop in Oklahoma City is Leveling the Head and Tail. Can you tell us a little bit about that concept? Give us a few insights into that concept and why that's important to massage therapists or manual therapists.
Yeah, I've been talking about that for a long time. Basically, Gil's going to totally agree with this. The spine has to have the head has to have a level platform to sit on. We've all known that. Moshe Feldenkrais got into it a lot, the head riding reflexes and all the different reflexes that are built into to our body that are trying to handle at a spinal cord level. The spinal cord tries to handle everything it can. It doesn't want to bother the brain with any more input than it has. So it tries to handle it on a local level. So when you've got problems with the OA joint, the head's cocked, the brain's always a little bit unhappy about that, and then, the spinal column has to have a level platform to sit on, which is basically the sacral base, but it's the pelvis too. So we try to make sure a client comes in, they got plantar fasciitis. Of course, you're going to go work on their feet first because you want them to know you hurt them. But to me, I'm looking at them and I'm going, this person is not going to get out of here till I try to level their head and tail. I want to keep those reflexes down as much as possible because I found that I get the best results if I can just focus on that. I'm not necessarily thinking about their text neck or that kind of my Vladimir Yonda stuff, as much as I'm thinking, let me just try to make the brain happy by making the spinal cord happy by getting rid of some of the reflex problems that are causing a lot of the person's deep pain.
Okay, so this is really a foundation of your work. Now, another thing I would like you just to describe briefly for us is nerve flossing. It's a method that you use frequently or talk about, and it's not a technique that we often see in massage therapy. So can you talk a little bit about nerve flossing and its benefits or why you do it?
Yeah, it's been around for a while, but in the early 90s, a wild and crazy guy that kind of reminds me of Gill, man, just funny as hell, came through Michigan State unexpectedly. To us, it was unexpected. David Butler, a physiotherapist from, he's professor in University of Sydney or Australia somewhere. And he just had his new book out, Mobilization of the Nervous System. I think that came out in 91. And so, he taught all of these kinds of his versions of these early experiments with nerve flossing. And I wasn't really that impressed because it's kind of different from what I did. I was get in there and get it done, and has to be pretty profound and feel profound and all that stuff. And so I didn't really practice it. Well, the next workshop I went to at Michigan State, I partnered up with this osteopath from New York City, and he goes, "Man, have you been doing that nerve stuff that Butler was showing us?" And I go, "No." And he goes, "Man, I have been getting fantastic results with some of my chronic neck, particularly neck pain people." So I go, when I get home, I'm going to start trying it more. So when I got home, that's what I started doing. And I found that it really was, I had to add it. It was just something that had to be added. And it took me a long time to figure out the way to integrate it into the skeletal fascial muscular model, but I finally came out and put the course out, Treating Trapped Nerves, which has been a very successful course, a lot of fun. I'm going to be teaching some of that nerve flossing stuff in Oklahoma City. And basically, it's just neurodynamics, like Gil was talking about, freeing up the whatever parts of areas that can entrap nerves. The cluneal nerve, for instance, it goes over the superior cluneal nerve. It goes over the hip. There's one that I have has little tunnels that helps that thing get over there. That's a nerve that I found is really overlooked. A lot of people are having butt pain, like gluteus medius type pain. Really, that superior gluteal nerve is getting trapped in that lumbodorsal fascia and stuff. I think those tunnels are collapsing on that nerve. So I found that using a few myoskeletal techniques have been able to open those tunnels up a little bit and give them some relief. And there are several areas that you can apply tissue work, more deep tissue work to help to free up those nerves. But basically, at the end of most sessions, particularly on my sciatic people, I'm always still doing the conventional nerve flossing, tibial and fibular nerve. I'm trying to make sure that it's gliding so that there's no entrapment sites and whatever it's sticking on. The Gill, now these turn me on to lymphatics. I'm all screwed up now, am I thinking now? Thank you, Gil. But I'm going to, from when you're not around, I'm going to say I invented that. I thought of that. No, it's the lymphatics that are compartments that are compressing those nerves. I just came up with that one. I just awakened one morning and started. Never mind.
It works for me.
Okay, so it'll be, this workshop will be interesting in Oklahoma City as sort of we explore the nervous system more and learn more some nerve flossing techniques. Now, I have to say to anyone that's watching this is Erik's events are not just, we call them workshops, but really they are events. It's like a rock show almost, really quite spectacular. And this is going to be the 10th year that you've done these workshops in Oklahoma City. As you think back over the years, is there something that stands out as a highlight from these workshops or these events?
Every year is a highlight in some way, even if it's a bad highlight. It's an unexpected highlight. It's things going wrong. But no, we've had some incredible educators come and teach, for the last 3 or 4 years, I think Wazlowski and Eric Stevenson, Till Luca did a fantastic presentation a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago. Last year, Diane Mikowski and Allison Denny were there, and you were there, Erik, and we had a great time on that. That's probably one of the most fun workshops I did last year. We have this 10,000 square foot ballroom that we're going to be in again this year. It's just beautiful, right down the heart of Oklahoma City during 4th of July weekend. It's just a blast down there. So much stuff to do. A lot of dancing going on, a lot of partying. But Eric Stevenson, yeah, he did a wonderful one too. Last year we did did a jam session with my one of my teachers, Nate Fay, who's a classically trained bass player, and he represented a stressed out client, and I was talking to him about how to lower the brain waves. And so he and I got into a jam session, drums and bass. And we only had one night to practice it, but it was really a blast. And so I enjoyed that. So it's always some wild, crazy thing going on down there. It's always a lot of fun. I'm really excited this year because my daughter, Adrian, she's a dual board certified physician in the internal medicine pediatrics, and I talked her into teaching with me in Ireland this last year. I brought the whole family, my grandkids and everybody, and she taught a 1 hour session on lumps and bumps and when to refer out, and it was a real nice presentation, just a short little overview of, since therapists like us see more skin than probably anybody else except Gill, we need to be able to recognize those things. Adrian is just going to give you the overall things, what you need to look for. It was so successful in Ireland that I've invited her back this year. She's going to take off work and come in and do an hour presentation on Friday too. So
yeah, so I have no doubt in my mind this is going to be a really fantastic event. Great guest speakers, of course. Now we know that you're doing the Oklahoma City event in June. Other than this leveling the head and tail workshop, what else do you have on your calendar? What projects or events do you have coming up in the future that we should know about?
I'm still trying to find conferences that I like, and there's one in Dallas that's the Shacklock, that was one of the first guys to really put the neurodynamics neuromobilization together as one of the key presenters. I think they got like 20 presenters, and they invited me to come down. Didn't invite me to present, but they invited me to come down for this 3-day event. And so I'm excited to do that. That's, I think, in September. And then I'm going to visit and assist a couple of my teachers, Nate Fay up in, I think that thing's in the Boston area, Hartford, Connecticut, maybe. And Tammy McHugh, I think she's in West Palm Beach. And so that's my favorite thing to do, come in and be a teaching assistant, because that way I'm out in the audience. When I do these big workshops, I don't get out in the audience and interact enough with the people. I really like to do that. And so it gives me a chance when I go as a teaching assistant to get out there and do what I really love, and that's the work. And so that's good. And then, of course, we got our Costa Rica retreat that I keep saying I'm going to quit doing, but this is our 22nd or 23rd year of the Pain Relief in Paradise Costa Rica retreat. That's at the end of November every year. And so I'm really excited to do that. I get to go back to my home in Costa Rica after that and spend 3 months, which is my favorite part.
Nice. Okay. Now, Gil, is there a question that I should have asked Erik but didn't in this interview?
How do you stay so handsome and fit and beautiful into?
I don't have anything else to do. Literally, I've got this staff now. I've got a staff, Marla Gold and Kim and Barb and all these people Ann, that are just, they just kind of do everything for me. And the more they do, the lazier I get. And the more I can go do hyperbaric and all the things I love to do. I'm into the anti-aging stuff, man. I'm into that. I'm into all of an Eckhart Tolle fan. So, that's why I loved your theology work so much, because I'm right on that same path with your spirituality. And so, that's what I do. I just focus on my health and try to just become a better person every day.
It's working.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Erik, for taking the time. Again, I know you're busy. You have more dissection to go do this afternoon, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I
there you go.
dissected
Got to
my
get it done. Only a month left.
I
Get to
dissected my
it.
sleep. I'm telling you.
And then
Erik,
we're going to see both of you at the Oklahoma City workshop,
Mhm.
June 30th to July 2nd, which is going to be a
Erik.
fantastic event. So really looking forward to that. Thank you
Erik.
both. And again, I'll see you both in Oklahoma City, June 30th.
Can't wait.
Have a great day.
You too.